Hello and welcome to the XtremeLabs demo video. In this video, we will demonstrate how learners can register, log in, and redeem their access codes in order to access digital hands-on labs offered by XtremeLabs. Learners can get their access codes from a marketplace or directly from us if you purchase from us or from your learning partner. This video has multiple parts. First, we'll demonstrate how you as a learner can register at our portal. And then we'll talk about how you log in after you've registered and verified your account. We'll also show you how you can redeem your access code and launch your lab. We'll take you through a demo of the lab environment and the different features that are available to you. And finally, we will talk about how you can contact the XtremeLabs support team if you face any technical difficulties. So let's go ahead and get started. Learners registering at the XtremeLabs portal for the first time will need to create an account by registering with your official email address. Please note that you will have to use a valid email address because you'll need to verify your account. The first step to accessing an XtremeLabs digital hands-on lab is to create an account. This requires a few steps of registering, verification, and login. In your internet browser, navigate to labs.xtremelabs.io. This is the standard XtremeLabs portal login page. If you are logging in as part of an existing organization, they may have a custom domain that you are following. You can see here in this window that we are part of the xltech.xtremelabs.io organization. If you already have an account, you can insert your credentials and just go ahead and click and log in. However, new users will need to register and validate your accounts before you log in. So if you are a new user, please select the register button, and this will take you to a registration page which contains a few fields that will need to be filled out. This should take no more than a couple of minutes. Make sure you put in your full name, email address, and password. And after you fill out all of the fields, you'll need to go ahead and click on the sign up button. After registering for your account, as a new learner, you'll receive a validation email from XtremeLabs in your email account. Go ahead and follow the steps in that email so that you can verify your email address. It takes just a few seconds to get the validation email from XtremeLabs, so please wait for that before you continue with the sign-in process. Once your account has been validated, you'll be redirected to the XtremeLabs login page as you can see here. Go ahead and use those credentials to log in. After you've logged in, you'll be directed to the View Labs page. Now, don't worry if you don't see anything under View Labs yet. If you're a brand new user and you would like to now redeem an access code, you can click on Access Codes in the leftmost menu. On the Access Codes page, you must enter the access codes provided to you by your learning partner or by XtremeLabs if you've made a direct purchase. The first step to accessing your labs is to redeem it. In order to redeem it, go ahead and navigate to the Add Code option. There will be a field in the top right part of your screen. Copy and paste or type in the code that was provided to you and click on Add Code. Your access will be added immediately. Once you've redeemed that code, you'll be able to see the course and lab pop up when you click on View Labs on the left part of the screen. As soon as that course and lab shows up in the second blue column, you will have immediate access. Now that we are back on the View Labs page, we can see all the different courses that we have access to. Most access codes will provide access to one course and all of the labs that are contained within that course. Some access codes do provide access to multiple courses. It just depends on the code. Here on the View Labs page, you'll see a mix of blue and white tiles. The white tiles represent all the hands-on labs, including exercises that you can complete by clicking on Take Lab. The blue tiles represent additional content that has been added either by XtremeLabs or collated and added by your instructor or your learning organization. Some of these blue tiles may link to specific technology providers. For example, this particular blue tile links to the content on the MS Learn website. This particular MS Learn content has been fully integrated with the XtremeLabs platform, and as an authorized lab hoster, the XtremeLabs hands-on labs correlate directly to the content found here. All of this content that has been gathered in the blue tiles updates dynamically, which means that as a student, you don't have to worry about using the latest content. Now let's take a look at the white tiles, which represent the lab modules. Each lab module contains some information, including the lab title, the lab duration, and the lab status. If you have already started work within a lab module or completed a lab module, you'll be able to see that lab status update. Now let's go ahead and start a lab. We'll click on Take Lab, and now we see a pop-up menu that provides information about the lab, and we'll need to confirm that we do want to continue launching it. And now the lab has started to launch. While waiting for your lab to launch, you'll see the screen pass through a few different status changes like this. You might see a connecting progress bar. You'll see that the lab steps are starting to load on the left part of the screen. You'll see some headers and footers appear on your screen. And finally, the workstation, which is the main part on the right where you do your work, will appear. Typically, a lab launch takes on average 30 seconds. However, if your lab is particularly complicated or has additional resources that are loading it, can take up to 2 minutes. This is normal. If your lab takes much beyond that, don't hesitate to reach out to our support team, which will show you how to do later in this video. Once the lab has been launched, you will see two sections of the lab environment. As I mentioned, the workstation, which takes up the majority of the right part of the page, represents a virtual machine window. It contains full access to all of the different applications, internet access if applicable, and other items that will allow you to complete the exercises in the lab. Most of our labs have a Windows virtual machine environment, and some labs have Linux or other virtual machine environments. The left-hand side of the screen shows the lab steps overlay. This section contains 4 tabs that enable learners to interact with the virtual machines and complete all the exercises. Here on this first tab, you can see the different instructions for each of the exercises that will meet the objectives of this lab. There are checkboxes that update as you click on them. This provides a way for you to self-check where you are in the lab, since we know that sometimes there are a lot of instructions and a lot of different steps to complete as part of each exercise. You can also click on Next Exercise to get to the next page. If you take a look at the top part of this panel, you'll be able to see the percentage completion, as well as the time that you have left within the lab. You might recall that the lab duration that you saw on the white lab tile before you launched the lab will correspond to the lab time left that you see here at the top. Now on the second tab of the overlay is the VM operations button. This gives different features that are available where you can manipulate the virtual machine. Clicking on the virtual machine's drop-down menu will show all the different VMs that you have access to. This particular lab only has access to one. However, if it had several, you would be able to switch between them simply by selecting a different VM in the drop-down. There are also several different features on these rectangular buttons that you can click on within each VM. For example, clicking on Control-Alt-Delete will give you a similar experience as clicking Control-Alt-Delete on your local computer. You'll be able to see the tasks and end applications. You can also paste content, for example, a long string of code. You can also restart the VM if that's part of the instructions. You can also take a screenshot, which if you do that right now, you'll be able to see a screenshot pop up if you click on screenshot at the bottom of the screen. The screenshot will reflect everything in the workstation that you see at the moment you take the screenshot. You can later access, download, or save the screenshot for use later on. There's also a reconnect button in case you lose your network connection, as well as an accessibility button, which gives some options if those are needed. Taking screenshots can be especially helpful if you would like to share your work with your instructor, take notes for practice later on, or reach out to our lab support team so that you can share exactly what you're looking at with them. The third tab on the right-hand side is the Lab Information tab. This includes a lot of information about the classroom you are in, as well as information that will help enrich your experience within this lab module. Let's start at the top. Where it says Cloud Credentials, there's a button where you can click on Cloud Express Pass. Cloud Express Pass, or CEP, is the completely managed, supported, and maintained set of cloud credentials that's provided by XtremeLabs. This is an alternative to using something like the Azure Pass or setting up your own trial cloud resources on the Azure portal or on AWS or a Google Cloud Platform. These cloud credentials will enable you to complete the exercises within the lab itself. Because these resources do have certain policy restrictions attached to them according to the exercises that are within the lab, make sure that you are sticking to the exercises and the use of cloud credentials that the exercises require. Other credentials that you might need to complete the lab include M365 or D365 credentials. This will depend on the type of lab that you have launched. If you have any questions about the cloud credentials, you can always reach out to our support team. A little further down on this page is the classroom information. You'll see the classroom name, duration, the name of your instructor, and other resources like virtual meeting links and file sharing repositories. These are shared by your instructor, so don't worry if you don't see them here. It simply means that they haven't shared these links with you. You'll also be able to see your organization, in this case, it's Excel Tech Partner, as well as files such as a user guide or other information that would be good to have access to while you're taking the lab. Finally, at the bottom of this page is all the additional content that will enrich your lab experience. For this particular lab, we see MS Learn content, as well as some pages with quizzes and knowledge checks that you can use to refresh yourself as you move through the lab. The content that's available here will depend on your learning organization and your instructor. They can add additional content or remove the standard content that comes with your XtremeLabs module. Let's go back to the fourth tab on the left-hand part of the screen. This is the Lab Notes tab. As a learner, we understand that you want to be able to remember what you've been doing within the lab after you've completed it. So this allows you to take notes while working in the lab and save them for later usage. You can also complete things like homework assignments and share these notes with your instructors after the fact. You'll have to check the Share with Instructor box to share the lab notes with your instructor if you do want your instructor to have access. You'll be able to access the lab notes for each lab module on the white tab on the View Labs page. Next, let's take a look at the Lab Actions button. The Lab Actions button contains some information that will allow you to either end or save the lab. Once you've completed your lab and don't want to go back to it, you can click on the End Lab button. This will clean up the information that you have stored on this virtual machine. If you click on End Lab, there will be a pop-up that asks you to confirm if you want to end your session. Make sure that you are ready to end before you click on it, because this action is not reversible. If you choose to save your lab, you'll be taken to a window that confirms the total amount of time that you can save it. For this particular lab, it's up to 2 hours, as well as the number of attempts that you have remaining to save. For this particular lab, it's a total of 3 attempts. Whether you have the Save Lab option available to you and how many saves and for how long is dependent on the particular lab as well as on your particular classroom. Some labs cannot be saved at all, and others may have shorter or longer save times. The Lab Steps overlay can also be detached from the lab environment and moved to a different screen if you have multiple screens to give more screen space for your virtual machine window. The virtual machine window size will automatically adjust once you detach the lab steps. You can also move the lab steps back into the virtual machine environment by clicking on the Attach Lab Steps button located on the far left side. And as you can see, the window will now automatically readjust to fit each of the elements back on the same screen. If you are part of a classroom, you will see that a classroom chat is available on the far right side of the virtual machine environment. This classroom chat enables you as the student to communicate with your instructor, and sometimes you'll also have the ability to communicate with other students within your classroom while you're working in the lab environment. You can talk to your instructor for specifics on what is allowable in the classroom chat within your lab session. When you look at the classroom chat, sometimes the instructor will provide reminders and information that will be useful while completing the lab. You can also ask questions of your instructor in case you need some additional guidance. This classroom chat is useful if you have questions about the content within the lab, as well as information that you need about the classroom and things like that. If, however, you have a technical issue or experience something that you'd like to ask about within the lab environment, you can reach out to the XtremeLabs support team. There's a button where you can click on Support at the bottom of the far left part of the screen. Click on Contact Us, and then you'll see some different methods to reach out. Our support team is accessible through this online web form on the left part of the screen, as well as through email, by phone, and through chat. You can reach us 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. The chat widget is located on the far left part of the screen on the bottom. While contacting the support team, no matter which method you use, whether email, phone, the online web form, or chat, it's very important to provide the lab instance ID that you can see at the top left side of the virtual machine environment. This lab instance ID is the footprint of your lab environment and is unique for every lab session. This will enable our support team to quickly be able to access the information that will help them help you. Now that you're more familiar with the lab environment, let's go ahead and end this lab session and go back to the account portal. As the lab is ending, you'll notice that the resources from your lab session are closing. This might take a few seconds up to a minute. After the lab ends, you'll see that you'll be brought back to the View Lab screen. If you click back on the course that you just launched, you'll be able to see that your status has now updated. If you had previously completed and launched the lab, it may not change. But if this was the first time launching the lab, you'll see a different status appear. Earlier, we talked about access codes and how to redeem an access code. The other menu that will be useful to you as a learner is History. Clicking on History will show you previous lab sessions that you've completed, the course that it belonged to, and what your progress looked like. You'll also be able to see the full status and progress of each of the labs you've taken. Additionally, you'll be able to see the access code that's linked to each of your sessions, as well as when that particular lab expires. If you do have a question about a previous lab session, you'll see that you can access the lab session ID on the left part of the screen. You can also see that there is an option to access support for technical lab support on the bottom left part of the screen. Clicking on Support will bring you to a page with similar information about how to reach out, including our online web form, and then also contacting our support team through email or by phone. And once again, you can also chat with our support team using that blue button at the bottom right part of the screen. If you have any additional questions about the content of this video, or if you would like to book a personalized live lab demo with us, please don't hesitate to reach out at support@XtremeLabs.io.